what you did to my car! Your car is fine. This woman is hurt. Do you know who you're talking to? No, but I know what I'm looking at. They think you bought this store for me.
I invested. You built everything they see.
Then nobody gets to erase my work.
Then we make the truth impossible.
Marcus, you're her son?
Yes, the woman you defended is my mother.
You helped when you thought I had nothing. I would have helped you either way.
She didn't stop to think about it. She didn't calculate what she had to lose or measure the gap between her worn sneakers and the woman's expensive heels. When the SUV rolled through the farmer's market and the elderly woman stumbled and fell, when no one in the crowd moved, Simisola Brooks stepped forward. She didn't know the woman's name. She didn't know her son. She only knew that an old woman was on the ground, tomatoes scattered around her like broken promises, and the person responsible was still talking. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It was a Saturday in late October, and the West Side Atlanta farmers market was already full by 8 in the morning. Vendors with canopies over folding tables, the smell of coffee from the corner cart, voices overlapping in the particular way they did when a neighborhood was still itself, not yet gentrified into something too clean to touch. Simisola had been at her mother's produce stall since 6:30. She had hauled the crates from the car, set the table, arranged the sweet potatoes and okra and bell peppers in the order that caught the eye, and made herself useful in the practiced way of someone who had spent every Saturday of her adult life doing exactly this. She was also 2 months out of a full-time job search that had produced nothing but a folder of polite rejection emails, and the phrase "will be in touch" stored in her phone like a bad omen. She was helping a customer bag butternut squash when she heard the horn. It was not a polite horn. It was the kind pressed by someone who believed the market pedestrian lane was a minor inconvenience to be pushed through. The black SUV came through the gap between 2 canopy tents moving too fast for the space, and the elderly woman who had been carrying a plastic crate of tomatoes stepped back from the sound, an instinctive flinch, and her heel caught the edge of a drainage she went down. The crate went with her. Tomatoes rolled in every direction. The crowd did what crowds usually did. It stopped and watched. Simisola was already moving. She was at the woman's side, in 4 steps, one knee on the wet pavement, hand on the woman's arm. "I've got you. Don't try to stand yet. Are you hurt? Can you tell me what hurts?" The woman was somewhere in her late 60s, dressed in a plain house dress and canvas sneakers, her white-gray hair pulled back neatly. Her face had gone pale under the shock, but her eyes were clear. "My hip," she said, "and my pride. We'll sort both of those. Stay still for a second." The SUV had stopped. The driver's door opened and a woman got out, 30-something, heels clicking on the asphalt, dark sunglasses, the kind of outfit that looked like it had been assembled for an occasion rather than worn. She looked at the tomatoes on the ground. She looked at the woman sitting in them. "Are you serious right now?" she said. "There's produce all over my hood." Simisola looked up. "Your car is fine," she said, her voice even. "This woman fell. I can see that." The woman, Vanessa, though Simisola didn't know her name yet, crossed her arms. "She stepped in front of me. People your age need to understand that this lane is for vehicles. If you can't navigate a market, maybe you shouldn't be here." The crowd was watching now in the particular, silent way that meant everyone was waiting for someone else to speak. Simisola stood. She was not tall. She was not dressed in anything impressive. She was wearing the same jeans and blue work shirt she wore every Saturday, and there was a smear of soil on her forearm from hauling crates. None of that changed the way she said the next thing. "She fell because your driver was moving too fast through a pedestrian area," Simisola said. "That is what happened. And the correct response when someone falls in front of your vehicle is to make sure they're okay, not to complain about your hood." Vanessa's expression shifted, not into embarrassment, into something sharper. "Excuse me? Do you know who you're talking to?" "No," Simisola said. "But I know what I'm looking at." A beat. Then Vanessa said, "You're going to regret that," and got back into the SUV. The crowd exhaled. Someone said something low that might have been agreement. The SUV moved on. Simisola turned back to the elderly woman who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite name. "Can you put weight on it?" Simisola asked. "I think so. Let me try." She helped the woman to her feet, slow and careful, one hand under her elbow. The woman was small, smaller than she'd looked upright, and she moved with the particular deliberateness of someone managing real pain without broadcasting it. They made it to the low wall beside the stall 3 yards away, and Simisola settled her onto it like she was handling something that mattered. "Wait here," she said. She went back for the crate. Most of the tomatoes were unsalvageable, split from the fall, rolling in the wet pavement grime. But some were intact. She picked through them one by one, checking each with her thumb, setting the salvageable ones aside. Her own money was in her back pocket, $12, enough for transport home and nothing else. She put 4 of them toward the tomatoes. The woman watched from the wall without speaking. When Simisola brought the sorted crate back and handed over a bottle of water from the cooler at her mother's stall, the woman took it with both hands and said, "You didn't have to do any of that, I know," Simisola said. She sat tilted outside her on the low wall. "Are you here alone? Do you have someone I can call?" "I'm fine, my daughter. I've been bumped before. Is your blood pressure?" "It's managed." The woman looked at her steadily. "What is your name?" "Simisola." "People call me Simi. The woman repeated it like she was saving it somewhere. "My name is Helen. Mama Helen. Are you selling here today, or just shopping?" "Just looking." She was quiet for a moment. Her eyes moved over the stall, the spilled crate, the crowd that had already dispersed back to its ordinary Saturday business. "People show you who they are very quickly," she said, almost to herself. "You just have to be patient enough to watch." Simisola glanced at her. "Did you see someone worth watching?" Helen turned and looked at her with that expression again, the one Simisola couldn't name. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't relief. It was something quieter and more deliberate, like someone checking a column of figures and finding it balanced. "Yes," Helen said. "I think I did." She stayed beside the woman for another 20 minutes, until color came back into Helen's face and her hands steadied around the water bottle. The farmer's market moved around them without caring who they were. A vendor nearby called out prices. A child ran past with a cup of apple cider. Simisola's phone buzzed, her mother asking where she'd gone, and she typed back, "Helping someone, be there soon." When Helen finally stood to leave, she moved slowly but steadily. She did not take Simisola's arm. She thanked her without fanfare and began walking toward the far end of the market, her small canvas bag in one hand. Simisola watched her go. She thought, "I hope someone's meeting her at the other end." She thought, "I should have asked for her number to check in later." She thought, "I don't even know if she got home okay." She did not think this is the moment that changes everything. She went back to her mother's stall, picked up the bags she'd left, and got back to work. The estate on Greenstone Drive sat back from the road behind iron gates, and a line of red maple trees that had been there since before the neighborhood had a name worth mentioning. The main house was 3 stories of pale stone and glass, the kind of place that didn't announce itself. It didn't need to. The interiors were warm rather than ornate, good wood, well-chosen art, rooms that looked like someone actually lived in them rather than staged them for a magazine spread. Helen Adeyemi had lived there for 31 years. She had raised her son in the East Wing. She had buried her husband from the front garden. She knew every stair that creaked and every window that let in afternoon light at the right angle, and she had never once thought of the house as a symbol of anything except home. Her driver had found her at the far end of the market and driven her back in 30 minutes of silence she was grateful for. She had changed out of the plain house dress and camet sneakers, put on her usual clothes, not extravagant, but not disguised, and sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea and her thoughts. Marcus came in just after 11. He was 38 and built like his father, broad through the shoulders, unhurried in the way he moved, though she knew the stillness cost him more than it looked. He had his father's ability to absorb a room the moment he entered it, and her habit of taking in more than he gave away. She had watched him learn both things without being taught, and it still moved her. "You went out again," he said. It was not a question. "I went to look at the market, without Dio. Without your phone charged." I had my phone. I simply didn't answer it. He sat across from her at the kitchen table and looked at her the way he looked at things he was deciding how to approach. She poured him a cup of tea without asking and slid it across the table. He wrapped both hands around it. "What happened?" he said. Helen told him. She was precise about it. The SUV, the horn, the fall. The pain in her hip that she would not admit to him was worse than managed. She told him about the woman who stood up and said what needed to be said. She told him about the careful sorting of tomatoes, the bottle of water, the 20 minutes on a concrete wall while the market moved around them. Marcus listened without interrupting. That was one of the things she had always respected about him. "Her name is Simasola," Helen said. "She goes by Simi. She was helping her mother at a produce stall. She had a job interview earlier in the week that didn't go anywhere. You learned all that from 20 minutes. I learn a great deal when people don't know they're being observed." She lifted her cup. She refused money. 3 times. Very directly. Not in the way people refuse when they want to be asked again. In the actual way. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You said someone came out of the vehicle. A young woman. Dark glasses. Well-dressed, she was more concerned about her paint than about the woman on the ground." Marcus set his cup down. He took out his phone and turned it toward her, the screen showing a photo he'd literally pulled up before this conversation. A woman in sunglasses at a rooftop event, all polished surfaces. Was it this woman? Helen looked at the photo for a long moment. "Yes," she said. The word landed in the kitchen like something being set down carefully so it didn't break. Marcus said nothing for a moment. Helen watched him run through the calculation, the relationship 6 weeks old, the introduction he'd been planning, the dinner he'd already considered booking. She watched him arrive at the other side of the calculation and sit with it. "I was going to introduce you this week," he said. "I know." She told me she was stuck in traffic that morning. She was not stuck in traffic. Marcus picked his phone up again and set it face down on the table. He was quiet long enough that Helen wondered if she should say something. She decided against it. He would land where he needed to land without her pushing. "She's coming over tonight," he said finally. "I asked her to come for dinner." "I know. I'll talk to her." Helen nodded. She stood, took her cup to the sink, rinsed it with the particular care she had always brought to small tasks. At the window above the sink, the red maples were starting to turn. She watched them for a moment. She refused gifts, Helen said again, without turning around. Not for show, because accepting them would make her uncomfortable in a way that mattered to her. She said it would make her feel like her kindness had turned to business. A pause. "I have not met many people who make that distinction out loud." Marcus said nothing. "Her name is Simi," Helen said, and turned back to the kitchen, and let the subject settle where it had landed. That evening, Vanessa Cole arrived at 7 with a bottle of wine she'd had her assistant select, and a smile she'd practiced without realizing she was practicing it. The house impressed her. It always impressed her, and she'd been here twice. She noted the art in the foyer, the ceilings, the quiet of the place, and felt again that particular satisfaction of being in rooms that cost money to breathe in. Marcus met her in the sitting room. He was not smiling. She put the wine down on the side table and started to tell him about her week, but he cut across it gently and asked her to sit down. He took out his phone. The security footage was low resolution, but clear enough. The market lane, the SUV, the woman on the ground, Vanessa's heels on the wet pavement. "Tell me what happened that morning," he said. The real version. Vanessa looked at the phone. She looked at Marcus. She started to speak. He let her get 4 sentences in before he said, "She's my mother." The room went very still. Vanessa sat in the silence for a moment that stretched out long enough to become something else. Not just awkwardness, but exposure. The kind of silence that shows you to yourself whether you want to look or not. Then she said, "Marcus, I didn't know. I understand that." She was in the middle of the lane. "My driver was trying to get through, and she just..." Vanessa stopped. Started again with a different approach, her voice dropping into something softer. "I didn't realize how it looked. I was having a really bad morning, and I said things I shouldn't have said. I know that. I'm genuinely sorry." Marcus looked at her. He had known Vanessa for 8 months. He had watched her be charming and effortless and entertaining. He had also, in quiet moments, watched her look through people she didn't consider worth looking at. He had told himself it was the industry. That performative confidence came with consequences, that she would soften with time and the right circumstances. He saw now that he had been optimistic in the specific way people were when they wanted something to be true. "You told her to go back to where she came from," he said. "I was upset. I didn't mean it literally. You said someone her age shouldn't be out in public without supervision." He paused. "You said it in front of other people, with your phone in your hand." Vanessa exhaled. Her expression shifted, still poised, but the calculation behind it was becoming visible. "Marcus, I am telling you I'm sorry. What else can I do right now? Do you want me to go apologize to her? Do you want to apologize to her? Of course I do, because she embarrassed you by being my mother, or because you genuinely regret speaking to an elderly woman that way." Vanessa held his gaze for a moment. "That's not a fair question. It's the only question." He stood. He moved to the window and stood with his back to her for a moment, looking out at the drive. "I've known you long enough to know that your first instinct when you saw her on the ground was not to help her. I've watched you walk past people for 8 months and file them as irrelevant. I didn't call it out. I should have called it out. So this is about more than one bad morning." "Yes." Vanessa was quiet. When she spoke again, her voice had lost the softness. "You know what I think? I think you've been looking for a reason to end this, and this is convenient. I'm ending this because my mother came home from the market with a bruised hip and a story about being told she didn't belong in public. And the person who said that is sitting in my house telling me how sorry she is, while calculating what she still has to lose." He turned around. "I'm not angry, Vanessa. I'm just done." She picked up her bag. She stood. For a moment she looked like she might say something real, something that came from underneath the performance. But the moment passed. "You'll regret this," she said at the door. It was exactly what she had said to the woman at the market, Marcus noted, the same phrase as the same register. He thought about that for a while after she left. He sat in the quiet house for an hour. Helen came through the sitting room at some point and saw him, and didn't say anything, just put a hand briefly on his shoulder as she passed. It was enough. By 10 o'clock he had made up his mind about one thing. He needed air, and he needed to be somewhere that wasn't managed. He drove himself for the first time in months. His regular driver, Deo, had texted twice asking if he was needed. Marcus had responded, "I'm fine, take the night." He took the Adeyemi group car, the company vehicle, not his own, which would have been noticed, and drove with no particular direction until he ended up on streets he recognized less than he expected to. The West Side. He had offices not far from here, but never came this way on his own. He turned down a street with a row of older commercial buildings, and the wide open block of a Saturday market, the stalls folded down for the weekend, canopies taken in, but the space still readable. He could see where it had been. The drainage grate in the pedestrian lane, the wall near the far stall where someone would have sat. He was not sure why he had driven here. He chose not to analyze it too closely. His phone showed 40% battery and 7 missed calls from business contacts who could wait. He kept driving. The car began to make a sound that it should not have been making, a low, rhythmic noise from somewhere under the hood, getting more insistent as he turned onto a quieter block. He pulled over. He sat for a moment, then turned the ignition off and back on, and the car started, and then did not, engine turning but not catching. He tried again. Nothing. He got out and looked at the hood in the way people looked at engines when they had no particular plan, and then a voice behind him said, "Do you want to try jumping it?" "I have cables." He turned around. The woman was about his height, wearing a blue work shirt with the sleeves pushed up, carrying a jump pack from the produce stall at the corner. She had clearly just finished loading something into a cart. She looked at him with the practical, assessing expression of someone who had solved this problem before, and was not interested in making it more dramatic than it was. He said, "That would help." She didn't ask him questions. She connected the cables with the efficiency of someone who had done it in the dark before, told him to try the ignition in 60 seconds, and waited with her arms crossed. The engine caught on the second try. "Leave it running for a few minutes," she said, unhooking the cables. "Thank you." He meant it in the particular way you meant things when you'd had an unexpectedly bad evening and someone handed you something useful without fanfare. Do you want? I don't need anything. It's cables and a battery, not surgery. He almost smiled at that. I'm Marcus. She looked at him. Something crossed her face briefly, recognition of nothing specific, just the slight adjustment of someone filing new information. See me, she said. He kept his expression neutral. The name landed exactly the way it had when his mother said it at the kitchen table. See me, he said. Do you sell here regularly? My mother does. I help on Saturdays. She was packing the jump pack back into the cart. Market's closed today, but I was helping her take inventory. What are you doing over here? You're not from this neighborhood. My car broke down in your neighborhood. That's a reason to be here. Not an explanation for why you were driving over here in the first place. She looked at him sideways, and there was something in it that was not unkind, just very direct. You don't have to explain. I'm just saying. I needed to drive somewhere I hadn't been before. She considered that. Fair enough. They were quiet for a moment while the engine ran, and the evening settled into the block around them. The light was going golden at the tops of the older buildings. Someone was playing music from an open window 2 floors up. What do you do? She asked. Business. She made a sound that was almost a laugh. Everyone says business. That's the answer people give when they don't want to answer. Maybe. Or maybe it's complicated to explain. Then give me the short version. He thought about it. Private investment. We acquire things and rebuild them. She nodded slowly. Things like what? Properties. Mostly. Some companies. In Atlanta, mostly. Some in other cities. She looked at him with those straightforward eyes that didn't seem to be adding anything up, just taking in what was there. You have a fancy car for a man driving around neighborhoods he doesn't know at 9 at night. The car belongs to the company. Ah, she nodded again, as if that confirmed something she'd suspected. Are you hungry? My mother made food earlier. It's still warm. He was surprised by the offer in the way you were surprised when something was simply and cleanly kind. I don't want to impose, I offered. That means it's not an imposition. She glanced at the engine, which was purring steadily. Give it another 5 minutes before you turn it off to test. They stood for a few more minutes. She was comfortable in the silence in a way that most people weren't. He noticed that. He noticed quite a few things because that was how he was built, and because Helen had described her well enough that some of what he was watching confirmed, and some of it surprised him. She was more wry than his mother had conveyed. Funny ear. The directness had a texture to it that wasn't harshness. It was more like she simply wasn't interested in performing anything. When 5 minutes were up, she told him to try the ignition. It started clean. You're good, she said. Don't turn it off again until you're home. He thanked her. He asked carefully, because he didn't want to ask badly, whether she'd be at the market next Saturday. She looked at him for a moment with an expression he couldn't fully read. I'm here most Saturdays, she said. My mother's stall is the one with the sweet potatoes out front. She picked up her cart and started toward the building at the far corner of the lot. He watched until she disappeared through the side door. On the drive home, he turned the name over in his mind, Simi. He had not told her who he was. She had not asked. There was something in that, the clean, unencumbered quality of an hour, with a person who had no context for him, that felt, for the first time in longer than he wanted to count, like relief. He pulled into the estate drive just before 10:30. Helen was in the sitting room, reading. She looked up. He said, I met her. Helen turned the page she was on, then closed the book. She looked at him for a long moment without speaking, and whatever she saw on his face made something in her own expression soften at the edges. Come sit down, she said. I'll put the kettle on. Simi didn't tell her parents about Marcus that night. She told her mother about the car and the cables, and the stranger who had good manners, and an evasive answer about what he did for work, and Rosa listened and said nothing particular, and Simi went to bed thinking about it for longer than she expected to. She was not the kind of person who replayed conversations. She had learned early that replaying things changed them, smoothed the edges, gave them a shape they hadn't had in the moment, and that shape was almost always self-flattering or self-defeating depending on her mood. So she had trained herself to let conversations exist the way they had actually happened without revision. This one she replayed anyway, not because of what he'd said, because of what he hadn't. He hadn't tried to impress her. He hadn't offered her money for the cables, even though he clearly had money. He hadn't performed any version of himself. He had just stood there in the evening light with his company car engine running and talked to her like she was a person he'd happened to meet, and at some point she'd realized she was doing the same thing and wasn't sure when she'd started. She went to sleep eventually. Saturday came again the way Saturdays did, earlier than she wanted, with more crates to carry and the particular cold of late October settling into the market block. She had put on 2 layers under her work shirt and was halfway through setting up her mother's stall when she heard a voice say, "Good morning." He was standing at the edge of the stall in the same kind of understated clothes he'd been wearing the other night. No company car this time, she noticed, with a paper cup of coffee in each hand. He held one out. She looked at it. She looked at him. "I know where you get coffee from," he said. "The cart on the east side." I asked the vendor which roast he recommended for someone who probably didn't want anything too complicated at 7 in the morning. She took the cup. "You came back. I said I would. You implied it. That's different." But she was already drinking the coffee, which was the right temperature and the right strength and not sweet, which was exactly what she would have ordered. She noted that without commenting on it. They worked. That was the part she hadn't expected, that he didn't stand there watching or making conversation from the side. He helped. When her mother arrived with the second cart and looked at him with the careful, observant look Rosa used on everyone she hadn't vetted, he introduced himself, asked what she needed moved, and moved it. He didn't make a thing of it. He just did it. Rosa watched him for an hour before she said anything. Then she said quietly to Simi, "He carries boxes like someone who has carried boxes before. Not like someone performing humility. Mama. I'm observing. It's different." He stayed through the first busy hour and then stepped back when customers came, standing at the edge of things without crowding the transaction. He bought a bag of sweet potatoes and didn't ask for a discount. When there was a lull, he came back and they talked not about anything consequential, just the market, the neighborhood, the cold, a vendor 2 stalls down whose prices had gone up since last month. Easy conversation. The kind that didn't announce itself. At some point, he asked her about the food store idea. She hadn't mentioned it. "How do you know about that?" A brief pause. The first moment where something shifted slightly in his composure. "You told me the other night, when we were waiting for the car." She thought back. She had mentioned it offhand, the way you mentioned things to strangers you expected never to see again. She had said something about a fresh produce shop, pre-prepped ingredients, aimed at working women, and who didn't have time to negotiate farmers' market crowds after 8-hour shifts. "You remembered that," she said. "It's a good idea. Good ideas without money are just talking." Not always. He said it simply, without the aggressive optimism of a motivational poster. More like someone who had watched ideas become things and knew what the middle part looked like. "What would you need to start small?" She told him the number, the real number, not the rounded-down modest version. A lease on a small commercial space on Peachtree Lane she'd had her eye on for 2 years. Basic refrigeration. Startup inventory. 3 months of operating buffer. She'd run the numbers more than once. He didn't react to the number the way people reacted when they were about to say something. He just absorbed it. "That's reasonable," he said. "It's also more than I have. Right now." She looked at him. "You're doing the thing where you sound like a motivational speaker." He almost smiled. "I'm doing the thing where I'm a businessman, and that number sounds executable. To you. To the right arrangement." He looked at the stall, at the careful way she'd organized the produce, at the small sign her mother had made with the prices. "You know the market. You know the customer. You know what they don't have time to find themselves." He paused. "Those aren't small things." Simi was quiet for a moment. She didn't trust the sudden warmth she felt toward the conversation, because she knew where warmth toward convenient conversations could lead, and she had no interest in becoming a story someone told later about the woman who got swept in. "What do you actually do?" she asked. not business, the real version. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, I run a private equity firm. We acquire undervalued properties and companies, restructure them, and build long-term returns, mostly in the Southeast. She took that in. So you have money? Yes, real money. Yes. She nodded slowly. Okay. She went back to arranging the remaining sweet potatoes in the way that caught the eye. I'm going to need you to slow down considerably. I know. I don't know you. You seem like a decent person, but I've met decent-seeming people before. That's fair. And I'm not interested in being someone's good deed. I'm not interested in a good deed. He said it without defensiveness, which made it land differently than it would have otherwise. I'm interested in a good idea and the person behind it. Those are separate things from whatever else is happening here. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, My mother sells here every Saturday morning. This is where you can find me. If you want to keep talking, keep showing up. And if you want to propose something, bring paperwork, because I don't do verbal agreements, he said. Understood. She turned back to the stall. After another hour he left, saying he had a meeting across town. He'd pushed twice already. He said goodbye to Rosa with the same directness he'd said hello with. Rosa watched him walk away and then turned to Simi with an expression that was very deliberately neutral. Don't say it, Simi said. I'm not saying anything. Your face is saying it. Rosa arranged a row of bell peppers carefully. I'm saying he carried the boxes without making you feel like you owed him something for it. That is not a small thing. She paused. Also, his shoes were expensive. You should know that before you decide anything. Mama, information is not pressure, it is information. Simi went back to work. She was smiling slightly without meaning to, and she was aware of it, and she decided for now to let it alone. That evening, she sat on the back step with her father while he drank his evening tea and the neighborhood went quiet. She told him about Marcus, the whole version, the car, the Saturday, the conversation, the money, the firm. Emeka listened without interrupting, which was his habit, and when she finished, he was quiet for a while. What do you want? He asked. I don't know yet. What do you know? She thought about it. He didn't make me feel small, and he didn't make me feel like a project. Emeka nodded. He drank his tea. The street lamp at the corner flickered once and steadied. That, he said, is a better start than most. Helen came back to the market the following Thursday. She came without the canvas sneakers this time, and without the plain house dress, though she was still dressed in the simple, practical way she preferred when she wasn't hosting. Dark slacks, a good coat, flat shoes. She looked like a woman who knew what she was worth without needing it visible on her body. Simi recognized her from across the block. She watched Helen make her way through the weekday vendors. Thinner crowd on Thursdays, more regulars than tourists, and felt something that was not quite anxiety and not quite surprise. Somewhere between the two. She had thought about the woman from the market more than she'd expected to. She'd stopped by the drainage grate on her way home 2 Tuesdays ago and stood there for a moment, thinking she should have gotten a number. Should have followed up. The woman had been alone and hurting, and Simi had let her walk away into the far end of the market without knowing whether she'd made it home. And then here she was, walking with a steadiness that said the hip was managing, and with an expression that was warm in a specific, directed way. Mama Helen, Simi said when she reached the stall. Simi. Helen said her name with the same careful precision she'd used the first time. I wanted to come back. How's your hip? Better. It was bruised, not broken. I have a good doctor. She set down the small tote bag she was carrying and looked at Simi with those direct, settled eyes. I wanted to thank you properly. I also wanted to bring you this. She produced a wrapped package from the tote, the size of a book wrapped in brown paper. Simi looked at it. Mama Helen, you don't need to bring me anything. You sorted my tomatoes in a wet parking lot. Anyone should do that. Anyone did not. Helen held out the package. It's not expensive, it's a journal. I saw it and thought of what you said about the food store idea. Simi took the package. She turned it over in her hands. If I keep accepting things, she said slowly, I start feeling like the kindness has a price. Helen was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I understand that exactly, and I want you to know that what I'm giving you is not a payment for what you did. It's a exchange between people. A very small one. Simi looked at her. There was something in the woman's stillness that she kept finding herself orienting toward, the way you oriented toward something stable when everything else was in motion. "Okay," she said. "Thank you." Helen smiled. She had a good smile, not the performing kind, but the settled kind, the kind that had been there long enough to fit naturally. She bought a small bag of okra from Rosa, who had appeared at the corner of the stall and was watching the exchange with an unregettable face, and she paid without haggling and said the price was fair. Rosa said, "You have a good eye." Helen said, "I've been buying produce in this city for 30 years. She looked at Rosa with that same settled attention. "Your daughter has a good heart," Rosa said, "I know." Helen asked if she could sit with them for a while. She helped pack bags for 2 customers in the same careful, efficient way she did everything, without making a production of it, and then she and Simi talked while the Thursday market moved around them in its quieter rhythm. She told Simi some things. Not everything. Simi understood even then that this was a portion, that there was a larger thing behind it she wasn't being shown yet. But what she offered was true. She'd grown up in Atlanta, the daughter of a building contractor and a schoolteacher. She'd married at 26. Her husband had died 11 years ago. She had 1 son. She did not at this point say his name. What she said about herself was simple, that she'd spent decades watching people treat other people as less important than themselves, and she'd decided a long time ago to go looking for the exceptions. Not as a test, as a practice, a way of keeping her own eyes honest. "So, you dress down on purpose," Simi said. "Sometimes, not always. Today I'm just wearing clothes. Last week you were in a house dress and sneakers." Helen looked at her steadily. "Do you think that changes what happened?" Simi thought about it. "No," she said, "but it changes how I feel now, knowing it." "Why?" "Because now I'm wondering if I was being watched." "You were being seen," Helen said. "That's a different thing. Being watched implies there's a radar or sensor someone's looking for. Being seen just means someone was paying attention." She picked up the okra she'd bought and turned the bag over in her hands. "I wasn't looking for a right answer from you. I was looking to see who you were, and you were exactly who you appeared to be." A pause. That is remarkably rare. They were quiet for a moment. The market moved. A vendor nearby called out a price. Rosa went to help a customer and did not come back immediately, which Simi recognized as deliberate. "I'd like to invite you to my home," Helen said, "if you'd be willing to come." Simi looked at her. "Come where?" "To my house. For a visit." "Nothing formal. Where do you live?" Helen gave her the address. "Greenstone Drive, Buckhead." She said it simply, without inflection, the way you said an address when it was just an address. Simi wrote it in her phone. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "Mama Helen, is that Greenstone Estate?" "Yes, that's." Simi paused. "That's Buckhead." "The Buckhead part of Buckhead." "I know where I live," Helen said. Mildly. Simi looked at her. She looked at the canvas tote. She looked at the plain coat and the flat shoes and the bag of okra in this woman's hands. "You were definitely testing me," she said. "No," Helen said. "I was watching. You weren't the one being tested. People reveal themselves when they think no one important is observing. I find out who they are, that's all." She stood, tucking the tote under her arm. "Come on Saturday afternoon. Tell me what time works for you, and I'll let the gate know." She said goodbye to Rosa, who had returned, and who watched her walk away with the same careful expression she used on everyone who had not yet been fully vetted. "Who is that woman?" Rosa asked when Helen was out of earshot. "I'm not entirely sure," Simi said. Rosa began reorganizing a row of peppers. "But you're going." It wasn't a question. "Yes," Simi said, "I'm going." That evening, she looked up Greenstone Drive on her phone and found what she'd suspected. Aerial photographs of a private estate, iron gates, red maple trees against pale stone. She looked at it for a long time. Then she looked up the property records, which were public, and found a name she didn't recognize. She put her phone down and thought about the woman in the plain house dress, sitting in scattered tomatoes on wet pavement with a bruised hip. She thought about how that woman's sin had sorted through the tomatoes with her without being asked, how she'd turned down gifts without embarrassment, how she'd looked at Simi with that expression Simi still couldn't fully name. She thought, this is the part where a reasonable person asks questions. She asked herself the questions. the reasonable ones. And then she thought, but I saw that woman fall down, and I saw what she did with the 20 minutes that came after, and I trust what I saw. She went to bed. She did not sleep particularly easily, but she slept. Saturday afternoon she put on clean clothes, not fancy, just clean, and took the bus to Buckhead. The bus let her off 2 blocks from the gate, which was close enough to walk, and far enough to have time to change her mind. She walked the 2 blocks without changing it. The security guard at the gate had her name on a list. That detail alone, that someone had written her name on a list at an iron gate in Buckhead, sat strangely Simonsi's chest as she walked up the drive toward the front door. The red maple trees were at full color now, October doing what October did in Georgia, when the season was paying attention. The house resolved out of the trees the way large, quiet things did, not all at once, but gradually until it was simply there. She had grown up in a house with 3 bedrooms and a yard her father had turned into a garden. She had walked through neighborhoods like this one before, the kind that looked maintained in a way that went beyond upkeep into something closer to curated, and she had never once thought she was likely to walk toward one of these front doors and have it open for her. Helen opened it herself. That was the first thing. Not staff. Helen. She was dressed simply, the same kind of sensible, unperforming clothing she wore to the market. She said, "You came, you invited me," Simi said. "I come to places I'm invited." Helen smiled at that and stepped back to let her in. The interior was not what Simi had steeled herself for. She had prepared for the particular performance of wealth, the deliberate grandeur, the surfaces that existed to be noticed. What she found was different. The entrance hall was large. Yes, but the art on the walls looked chosen rather than purchased. The floors were polished dark wood that showed age without embarrassment. A row of family photographs on a sideboard. A book left open on a chair, spine up. The house looked inhabited. That was the right word for it. "Come and sit," Helen said. "I made tea. Do you want tea or something else? Tea is fine." They went through to the sitting room, which looked south over a garden that had been allowed to run a little wild at the edges, while staying tended in the center. Helen poured from a pot that had been waiting, and Simi sat in a chair by the window, and tried to absorb the information that this woman had been buying okra in a plain tote bag from her mother's stall. "I want to explain," Helen said, sitting across from her. "You said it wasn't a test. It isn't. But the setup has a shape that looks like a test, and I'd rather explain the shape." She settled her cup in her lap. "When my husband was alive, he used to say that wealth changed the way people spoke to him, before they knew he had it versus after. He found it disturbing. So we made a practice of it, going out without the markers sometimes, seeing what we'd see." She paused. "After he died, I kept doing it, not because I was unhappy with the life we'd built, because I found it clarifying." Simi looked at her tea. "Clarifying what?" "Character. My own, sometimes. Other people's, usually. You learn to read people quickly when you've removed the context they use to calibrate their behavior." She looked at Simi directly. "You didn't calibrate. You simply reacted. I saw someone fall down. Yes. And then you stayed for 20 minutes and sorted through wet tomatoes without anyone asking you to." Helen's voice was quiet but not soft. "That is what I wanted to tell you. That I saw you do that. That it meant something." Simi didn't say anything for a moment. She looked at the garden through the window. A crow landed on the stone wall at the far edge and then left again. "What did you want from me today?" she asked. "Coming here." "Nothing," Helen said. "I just wanted you to know the truth. What you walked into and what it was." She set her cup down, "And I wanted to give you the chance to leave if you'd like to. Now that you have the full picture." "The full picture of what?" The door opened. She did not hear him come in. The house was well made enough that it absorbed footsteps, and so when she turned her head at the sound of the door opening behind her, she was not prepared. Marcus stopped in the doorway. She turned in her chair and looked at him and felt the recognition land in her chest with the specific, physical quality of something true. The man from the stalled car. The man who had carried boxes at the market without making a performance of it. The man whose shoes had been expansive, which her mother had noted, with the precision of someone who noticed things and filed them away without drama. He was looking at her with the same expression, the same particular stillness of someone who had been expecting something and was now calibrating what they'd gotten instead. Helen said, "You from the other chair. I see you've already met." Neither of them said anything for a moment. The sitting room held the silence without strain, which was its job. Then Simi said, "Your car really broke down?" "Yes," Marcus said. "You didn't know who I was, not until you said your name. And then I wasn't certain." A pause. I knew she had mentioned someone called Simi. I didn't know if it was the same person. It was the same person, yes. Simi looked at Helen, who was watching both of them with that settled, attentive expression that she now understood completely. She looked back at Marcus. She thought about the Saturday market, the coffee at the right temperature, the boxes, she thought. He had information I didn't have. He knew who I was. He came anyway, and did not use it, she thought. That is either very calculated or very honest, and I don't know which one yet. "I need a minute," she said. She stood. "Can I?" She looked toward the window and the door behind it that opened onto the garden. "Can I step outside?" "Of course," Helen said. She went through the garden door and stood in the October afternoon, with the slightly wild edges and the stone wall and the crow that was back on the far corner. She put her hands in her jacket pockets and stood still for a moment and let herself think. What she thought was, nobody told her this would be simple. What she thought was, she had not been lied to. She had not been set up. She had met an old woman at a market and helped her because that was what you did when someone fell down. Everything that came after was real events in sequence. What she thought was, the man inside knew something she didn't, and he had still shown up to carry boxes on a Saturday morning and bought sweet potatoes without asking for a discount. What she thought was, that was not nothing. She stood in the garden for 5 minutes. Then the door opened behind her and she heard footsteps on the stone path. Not Helen's, and Marcus came to stand beside her at the appropriate distance that said he was not crowding her. "I can answer questions," he said, "or I can just stand here and not do anything you haven't asked for. Either is fine." She looked sideways at him. "Do you always talk like this?" "Like what?" "Like you've thought carefully about not doing too much." He was quiet for a moment. "I've learned the cost of doing too much," he said. With some things, she nodded. She looked at the stone wall. The crow had gone somewhere else. "Did you know you were going to see me again when you drove over to that neighborhood?" she asked. "I was driving without direction. I ended up there. I'm not going to tell you, there was no reason for it." He paused. "But I didn't plan what happened. I just didn't drive away from it." She thought about that. "Ask me a question," she said. He thought for a moment. "When did you decide to step in?" "At the market." "When did you decide?" "I didn't decide," she said. "I was already moving." She felt him receive that in the particular silence of someone putting something in a safe place. "I'd like to get to know you," he said. "I'd like to do that correctly, slowly." Without any of this, he gestured at the house behind them, being what you're responding to. "Then slow down," she said. "I'm trying. Try harder." But there was something in her voice that wasn't discouraging, and they both knew it. She went back inside. Helen had refilled the tea without being asked. They stayed for another hour. When Simi left, the driver Helen had called waited by the gate, and Simi stood on the drive for a moment and looked at him, and then back at the house. Then she got in. She took out her phone and called her mother. "Mama," she said. "You know that Mama Helen from the market?" Rosa said, "Yes. She's not poor." A pause. "How not poor?" Simi looked out the window at the iron gate receding behind the car. "Mama," she said. "She lives in a mansion." Her parents listened to all of it. Rosa sat at the kitchen table with her hands around a cup of cooled tea, and Emeka sat across from her with his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and Simi told them everything from the beginning in the order it had happened, including the parts where she wasn't sure what she thought. She had learned a long time ago that the most useful thing about her parents was that they did not require her to have already decided before she spoke. When she finished, Rosa said, "The man from the market. He knew who you were. He knew my name. He didn't know what I looked like until he saw me, and then he didn't say anything. Why not? He said he didn't want to use it." Simi turned her cup in her hands. He said he didn't know how to say it without it becoming something other than what it actually was. Emeka made a sound that was not quite agreement and not quite skepticism. That's either a careful person or someone who practices being careful. I know. Simi looked at the table. I can't tell yet. Which is exactly why you don't rush, Rosa said. I know, Mama. I'm not reminding you because I think you'll rush. I'm reminding you because he has money, and money creates a kind of gravity that pulls things faster than they should go, even when nobody means it to. Simi looked up. You're not telling me to be careful because you're worried about him. I'm telling you to be careful because I know you, Rosa said. You will be fair to him before you're fair to yourself. You will give him the benefit of a doubt you wouldn't give yourself. And I want you to remember that you are also allowed to move at your own pace. Emeka said, What does your gut say? Simi thought about it honestly. Not the calculated version, but the actual reading the garden. The 5 minutes of standing still. The question about the market. My gut says he's a decent person who did something a little complicated for reasons that weren't bad, she said. And it says that isn't the whole picture yet. Then let the rest of the picture come, Emeka said. You don't have to decide anything now. She didn't. She slept without replaying the conversation this time, which felt like progress. Marcus texted her on Monday, not on Sunday, which she noted. The text said, I know I said I'd slow down. Consider this slow. I'm still thinking about what you said at the market, about already moving. I'd like to hear more about the food store idea when you're ready. No pressure on any front. She didn't respond until Tuesday. She wrote, I'm free Saturday afternoon. Same market. We can talk about the store. He wrote back, I'll bring the coffee. She put her phone down and allowed herself to be briefly pleased about that, and then went back to the application she'd been working on. On Saturday, Marcus came to the market and listened to her talk about the store for 2 hours without once suggesting she should do it differently. He asked good questions, the kind that came from someone who had analyzed businesses before, not the kind that came from someone performing interest. When she explained the customer base she'd mapped, women between 30 and 55, working full-time, who wanted fresh, high-quality ingredients without the time cost of a full farmer's market shop, he said, the prep component is the differentiator. The market has the produce. The store has the ready-to-use version. That's a different value proposition. That's what I said, she said, in different words, in better words. She looked at him. Are you always this agreeable? I'm agreeable when someone is correct. She went back to explaining the supply chain she'd sketched out in the journal. Helen had given her 3 core vendors she already knew from her mother's supplier network, 2 potential retail relationships, a pre-order model for meal kits she'd roughed out on 4 pages of notes. He read through the notes when she handed them to him. He read carefully and without rushing, which told her something. This is more developed than you let on, he said. I didn't let on anything. You didn't ask how developed it was. Fair. He set the notebook down. What do you need to make this real? She told him the number again. The real one. He didn't blink. I want to propose something, he said, and I want you to hear all of it before you say no. You're assuming I'm going to say no. I'm assuming you're going to think carefully before you say yes, which is different. He looked at her directly. I want to invest, not give, invest. Formal written partnership. The structure is, I put in the startup capital, you run the business, all operating decisions are yours. We split the profits after expenses, but your ownership stake is majority, 60% to my 40. Your name appears first on every legal document. If the business closes, you retain the brand and the customer relationships. I get the equipment. Simi looked at him for a long time. Why? Because the idea's good, because the market analysis is sound, and because he paused. Because I think you'll do it the right way, and that's what I want to put money into. And the other reason. He didn't pretend not to know what she meant. The other reason is that I want there to be something between us that's as honest as possible. And an investment on paper, with your name on the line before mine, is more honest than dinner. She thought about that for a while. She looked at the market, at her mother's stall, at the things she'd been sorting through and planning and sketching out for 2 years in notebooks that kept running out of pages. I want to have it reviewed, she said, by a real lawyer. My choice, not yours, of course. And I want to negotiate the terms before I sign anything. I'd expect nothing else. And if the business does well, I want the option to buy out your stake at market rate within 5 years. He nodded. We can write that in. Then I'll think about it, he said. Take the time you need. She thought about it for 6 days. She talked to a small business attorney her father knew, a woman named Iris who had represented neighborhood contractors for 15 years and who read the proposal Marcus had drafted and made several additions that Simi insisted on before she would look at the signature line. Iris said, "This is an unusually clean investment agreement. Whoever drafted it was either genuinely trying to protect you or has a very good lawyer doing it for him." "Probably both," Simi said. "Both is fine. Just make sure these 3 clauses go in." They went in. Simi brought the amended version to Marcus on the second Saturday. She laid it on the table between them, face up, her changes marked in blue ink. He read through it without comment. Then he picked up a pen and signed it. She watched him sign. Then she took the pen, which was a normal pen, not an expensive one, and she signed her own name below his on every page where her name appeared first. When she finished, she put the cap back on the pen and set it down. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. They looked at each other across the table in the particular way you looked at someone when something real had just been created between you, and neither of them reached for the easy warmth that the moment might have allowed, because both of them understood that the next thing they built needed to be slower and more careful and more true. Rosa appeared at the edge of the stall. She looked at the papers. She looked at both of them. "Did you sign?" she asked Simi. "I signed. With a lawyer. With Iris." Rosa nodded. She picked up the pen and turned it over in her hands, then set it back down. "Good," she said. "Now put the paperwork away and help me with these boxes." Marcus stood up. "I can help." Rosa looked at him. "You're still here next Saturday? If that's all right." She looked at Simi. Simi said nothing. "Fine," Rosa said. "But the heavy crates go in the back first." The space on Peachtree Lane had been empty for 14 months when the new lease was signed in November. It was small by the standards of the people who usually leased on this block. 800 square feet, a front room that faced the street, a back room with a commercial refrigeration unit that needed replacing, and a storage area that smelled like the cleaning supply company that had occupied it before. The exterior was unremarkable, beige paint, a single display window, a door that stuck slightly in cold weather. Simi stood inside on the first walkthrough and felt something settle in her chest that she hadn't known was unsettled. "It needs work," Marcus said beside her. He was looking at the refrigeration unit with the assessing expression of someone used to evaluating things that needed restructuring. "Everything needs work," Simi said. "That's not a disqualifier." He looked at her. "No, I know." She had the renovation plan sketched out before the ink on the lease was dry. She had the supplier calls made before the first contractor came through the door. She had chosen the name, which had been in her notebook for 2 years, Semi-Fresh. Clean, direct, her name in it without announcing it. The signage she drew by hand on graph paper and brought to the sign shops herself. Marcus's role in the next 6 weeks was principally to write checks on schedule and stay out of her way, which he did with a discipline she respected. He came to the space twice during the renovation, once when she asked him to come look at the refrigeration installation, and once when she didn't ask, but he stopped by and asked through the door if she needed anything, and she said, "Not right now, but leave the coffee." He left the coffee. He left. Helen visited once. She arrived without announcement, looked at the display window, looked at the back room, ran her hand along the new shelving Simi had selected and said, "Good wood." That was all. She stayed for 20 minutes and left with a bag of the test-run produce Simi had brought in to check the display arrangement. The soft opening was a Saturday in late November. Simi set up the front window with seasonal produce, late butternut squash, fresh herbs, sweet potatoes, and arranged the prepped meal kits in the refrigerator case in the same careful way she arranged her mother's stall. The customers who came in the first hour were people she knew from the market. The second hour brought people from the block. By the third hour, there were people she'd never seen before, which meant word was traveling. She sold out of the meal kits by noon. Marcus was there at the opening hour, which she'd told him he didn't have to be. He stood near the door and held it open for customers and handed bags and did not once suggest a different arrangement for anything. He was useful in the way people were useful when they understood where they were needed and where they weren't. Rosa came at 10 and stayed until closing. Helen sat at the corner table for an hour in the early afternoon with a cup of tea and a copy of the newspaper, looking entirely ordinary in the ordinary way she'd perfected, and several customers said hello to her with the ease of people who thought she was a regular, which, Simi supposed, she was. They counted the day at close. Simi sat in the back room with the numbers in front of her and felt the solid, verifiable weight of something that was hers. The store found its rhythm quickly. Simi sourced from 3 vendors she'd built trust with through years of watching her mother negotiate. People who knew her family, who brought her the same quality they'd give a long-time account. She ran the floor herself 6 days a week, with Rosa helping on Saturdays and a young woman named Demi, who came in for afternoon shifts, and who Simi trained with the same exacting attention she applied to everything she cared about. The customer base came in the profile she'd mapped. Working women mostly, who came in once or twice a week for prepped kits and good produce and a shopping experience that didn't require 45 minutes of navigation. She knew their names by week 3. She knew what they bought and what they'd tried and what they'd come back for. Word moved through the neighborhood and then past it. Marcus came in most weeks, but not every day, which was the right frequency. He came the way someone came who was interested but not managing, who wanted to know how things were going without needing to direct how they went. He bought things. He carried things when she needed. He sat at the corner table, sometimes with his phone, and did work, quietly, in the way someone sat in a space they cared about without claiming it. One evening in December, after she'd closed the front door and turned the sign and was finishing up in the back, he brought in takeout from the Thai place, 2 blocks over, without being asked, and they ate at the counter together while she went through the week's numbers. "You're up 17% on the prepped kits," he said, looking at the sheet she'd left facing him. "I changed the packaging," she said, unwrapping her container, more visible from the refrigerator case. People make decisions faster when they can read the contents without opening the case. "Is that from your business administration classes?" "That's from watching my mother sell peppers." He looked at her for a moment. She was not looking at him. She was eating and reading and doing 3 things at once in the efficient way she did everything. And he watched her in that way she'd noticed, the way that was not performing observation but just actually looking. "What?" she said without looking up. "Nothing. Say it." "I was going to say something obvious," he said, "about being glad I came back to that market the second Saturday." She looked up then. He was not performing anything, no angled charm, no calculation behind the words. He just looked like a man who had said a thing that was true. She said, "You should have told me you knew who I was." You should have said, "I think my mother told me about you." "Yes. I should have. Why didn't you?" He thought about it. "Because I'd just had a week that reminded me how much the name changes things," he said. "And I wanted one more conversation where I was just a man with a stalled car, and you were just the woman who fixed it." She held his gaze. "That's honest, but it's also a little selfish." "Yes," he said. "I know that too." She went back to her numbers. She ate her food. After a moment she said, without looking up, "I'm not angry about it. I just needed you to say it." "I know," he said. "I appreciate that." They ate the rest of the meal in a comfortable quiet that had taken weeks to earn and had not been rushed. Outside the display window, Peachtree Lane had gone dark and the streetlights were doing their evening job. A woman walked past with a bag of groceries. A man walked past with a dog. The city did what the city did. Simi locked up at 8 and they walked in the same direction for half a block before she turned toward her bus stop. "I'll have Dio drive you," Marcus said. "I take the bus. I know. I'm offering an alternative. The bus is fine. I've been taking it for years and nothing has happened to me on the bus." She turned to go, then stopped. "Marcus." He waited. "I'm glad you came back, too," she said. "That's not a big thing. I'm just telling you." She walked toward the bus stop. He stood on the block and watched until she turned the corner, which she allowed herself to find quietly gratifying. She texted her mother on the bus home. "The store is going to be okay, Mama," Rosa responded 3 minutes later. "I know, I told you." Simi looked at the text and smiled, and looked out the window at the Atlanta evening moving past. The city was full of people going in every direction, the way cities always were, and she was one of them, going exactly where she was supposed to go. She had her name on a lease. She had a store with customers who came back. She had a business partnership written on paper with her name first, and something growing beside it that was still tentative and real and carefully paced. She did not think. Nothing can go wrong now. She had been alive too long to think that. She thought, for right now, this is enough. The photograph appeared on a Friday morning in the second week of December. Simi was in the back room at 6:30, slicing bell peppers into the prepped kit containers when her phone buzzed with a text from Demi that said, "Did you see this?" The link below it went to a page Simi didn't recognize, one of those Atlanta lifestyle and entertainment blogs that ran half press release and half rumor in a layout designed to make both look equally credible. The headline read, "Adeyemi Group CEO, Marcus Adeyemi's new girlfriend. Market vendor receives shop in Buckhead District." The photograph was from the soft opening. Someone had taken it through the front window. Simi at the counter, Marcus beside her, the display window with the signage behind them. It was a clear image. There were 2 other images in the piece. Marcus at a business event from what looked like 2 years ago, and a Street View screenshot of the Peachtree Lane address. The text was 6 paragraphs, short and casual in the way these pieces always were. It called Semi-Fresh a boutique market shop that sources confirm was funded by the private equity billionaire. It described Simi as a market vendor from the West Side and referred to their relationship, twice in quotation marks, their relationship. Simi read it through once. Then she set her phone down, finished the bell peppers, sealed the containers, and put them in the refrigerator case. Then she picked her phone back up and read it again. The word vendor was not wrong, technically. She helped her mother at a produce stall. The word billionaire was presumably also not wrong, though she had not used that word herself. The implication that the store had been bought for her, given to her, arranged as an accessory to a rich man's interest was both wrong and completely understandable given what the piece chose not to say. She called Marcus at 8. He picked up on the second ring. "I saw it," he said. "When?" 40 minutes ago. Deo flagged it, okay. She was keeping her voice level, which required minor effort. "I want to be clear about what I think and what I don't think. I don't think you leaked it. I didn't. I know. I also don't think you can control whether someone takes a photo through a public-facing window. That's not on you. I'm still sorry it happened. I know." She stopped, started again. "What I don't like is the framing, the word vendor. The implication that the store is a gift, the quotation marks around relationship. None of that is accurate. None of it is accurate. But it's what's out there now, and I don't have a platform to correct it. And you do. And I need to know what you're thinking before you do anything." He paused. "I was going to have my communications team reach out to ask them to correct the ownership description." "No." "Why not?" "Because a correction from your communications team will generate 2 more articles about how the billionaire's girlfriend had her business right up fixed by his PR team. That is worse than leaving it." She breathed. "I need to think about this. Take the time. I won't do anything without talking to you first." She spent the morning in the store, which was full in the particular way it got on Friday mornings. She served customers. She answered questions about the new lemongrass shrimp kit. She made change and restocked the front display and did every ordinary thing the store required. And behind it she was running a separate calculation about what the piece meant and who would see it and what they would think. The customers who came in that morning were warm and normal. 3 of them mentioned seeing the blog. None of them said what the article had implied. One woman said, "My friend sent me that link and I finally came in. Your meal kits are excellent." Simi said thank you and meant it, and also filed that away. The piece had sent people her way who might not have come otherwise. That was a complicated thing. At noon, she called her father. Emeka said, "Does the article say anything untrue about you? It implies the store was given to me." "Does it say that?" "It implies it." Implications aren't facts, Emeka said. The store exists. Your name is on it. You run it. The people who come in will see what it is. The people who read blogs will think what they think regardless. I know, Papa. Is the business okay? The business is fine. Then the business is fine, he said, with the particular equanimity of someone who had been watching her handle difficult things her whole life and trusted her to handle them. She felt better after that. Not completely, but better. What she did not feel better about was the name of the company in the third paragraph. Adeyemi Group. She had known Marcus ran a private equity firm. She had not known because she had not looked how large that firm was. She looked now. She found the company profile on a financial news site, Adeyemi Group. Founded 2015, managing approximately $4 billion in assets across Southeast real estate and commercial sectors. Private and closely held, headquarters in Atlanta. Billionaire was not an exaggeration. She had known he had money. She had understood he had real money. She had not quite totaled the number and let it sit next to everything else at the same time. She sat with it for a while. She let herself have the feeling that came with it, which was not quite fear and not quite vertigo, but somewhere near both. She let it be what it was. Then she thought about the signed partnership agreement in her folder at home, and she thought about her name first on every document, and she thought about the store she had designed, and the customer base she had built, and the bell peppers she had sliced at 6:30 that morning. She thought, the number doesn't change what I know about him. She thought, and I am not going to let a number be the thing that decides what I do. She texted Marcus that evening, I'm okay. The store is fine. People came in because of the blog. Net positive for foot traffic. I still hate the framing. I'm not asking you to do anything. I just wanted you to know where I landed. He wrote back, thank you for telling me. I'm sorry the world got into something that was ours. She read that twice. She thought about the word ours, the way it covered both the business and the other thing, in the careful way he used language when he was being deliberate. She typed, don't be sorry about that part. She sent it before she could revise it, which was probably the right call. She did not think about Vanessa. She had not thought about Vanessa in weeks, which was how little bandwidth she had allocated to a woman who had exited the story before she fully entered it. Vanessa, however, had been thinking about Simi. A friend of a friend had sent her the blog link the same morning it went up with the message. Did you see this? She had seen it. She had read it 3 times with the particular attention of someone doing an assessment. She had looked at the photograph, the market woman, her counter, her signage, and she had felt something that started as contempt and curdled, over the course of 3 readings, into something sharper. She had 423,000 followers on her main platform. She had worked for 6 years to build that number. She had attended events and sent packages and cultivated relationships, and calibrated her face for every lens that had ever pointed at her. She had done all of that work, and Marcus Adeyemi, who had been her most significant relationship, who had represented everything her platform was supposed to attract, had left her for a woman who sorted vegetables. She opened her laptop. She opened a new post draft. She began to write. Not that night. She wanted to be careful. She wanted it to look like something other than what it was. She began to write and delighted and rewrote and revised for 4 days until what she had looked like, observation rather than grievance, and felt, to her eye at least, like a story anyone would find interesting. She posted it on a Tuesday morning. Simi's phone began to ring before she finished opening the store. Vanessa's post was titled, What Nobody's Telling You About Atlanta's New Boutique Market Story. It ran to 8 paragraphs written in the register of someone sharing a personal account. Not bitter, she'd made sure of that. Measured. Concerned, the tone of a woman who had been adjacent to a situation and had questions. The details it contained were accurate in the ways that mattered for implication and inaccurate in the ways that mattered for truth, it said. That she had once been in a relationship with a successful Atlanta businessman. That she had ended that relationship after observing certain patterns. That since then she had watched a story develop that raised questions for her. That an elderly woman who was, in fact, the businessman's mother, had been seen at a local farmer's market wearing simple clothes, in a way that looked, to multiple witnesses, deliberate. That a young woman from that same market had befriended the elderly woman, and shortly thereafter been introduced to the son. That the son had invested in a business venture for the young woman. That she found the sequence of events interesting and wanted to ask, was any of this spontaneous, or was it a carefully constructed approach? It did not use Simi's full name. It used the initials SB. It described her as a market vendor from the West Side, currently running a produce retail shop funded by a private equity billionaire. By noon, it had 47,000 interactions. By 6 in the evening, it had 112,000. Simi read it in the back room at 8 in the morning and felt something go very cold and clear in her chest. She read it again. She identified every inaccuracy, not the surface ones, the structural ones, the implication that she had known about Marcus's identity, the implication that befriending Helen had been a strategy, the implication that the store had been given, not invested in, the suggestion that the sequence of events pointed to calculation, when the actual sequence of events pointed to exactly the opposite. She also identified what was not there: no actual evidence, no named sources, no specific quotes, nothing that could be verified, because nothing verifiable supported the narrative being constructed. She called Marcus. She read him the piece over the phone. He listened without interrupting. "She's being careful," he said, when she'd finished. "She's being careful," Simi agreed. "Nothing actionable. Just enough implication to land. I'm going to call my legal team." "Not yet." Simi thought for a moment. "Let me see what happens today. Sometimes the best response to something like this is nothing. If I react, it becomes a fight. If I don't react, it's one side. And if it spreads, then we decide what to do about it when it's actually spreading." She paused. "Don't do anything yet. Please." He didn't want to wait. She could hear it in the particular quality of his silence. But he said, "All right, I'll wait." She opened the store on schedule. The morning was not what she'd expected. Several customers came in who she'd never seen before. People who mentioned Vanessa's post, but not in the way she'd feared. One woman said, "I saw that piece this morning. It sounded shady, so I came to see what the actual store was like." She bought 3 meal kits and a bag of sweet potatoes, and said the prepped shrimp mix was better than anything she'd put together herself in months. 2 other people said similar things. People were not as easy to manipulate as Vanessa had assumed. Then, at 2 in the afternoon, the door opened. Vanessa walked in with 2 of her friends. She was dressed as she was always dressed, to be looked at. Her friends had their phones already out. Simi was at the counter. She watched them come in without changing her expression. "Hi," Vanessa said. She said it with the bright, easy inflection of someone who had practiced the opening. "We were in the neighborhood. Welcome," Simi said. "Can I help you find something? We're just looking." Vanessa moved along the front display, her friends behind her, phone cameras at angles that were not subtle. "This is a nice little place," Simi said. "Thank you. Very cozy." "Very." Vanessa turned a bag of prepped vegetables over in her hands. "Modest." One of the other customers at the refrigerator case moved to give the group room, and then seemed to decide not to, and stood her ground in a way Simi noticed and appreciated. Simi said, clearly, and without sharpness, "If you're not here to buy, I'm going to ask you to leave. I have other customers." Vanessa put the bag down. "We have every right to be here. It's a public shop." "It's my shop," Simi said, "and I get to decide who's welcome in it." "You are welcome if you're shopping. You're not welcome if you're filming my customers for content." Vanessa's friend lowered her phone slightly. "You've gotten confident," Vanessa said, "since your billionaire boyfriend renovated a shop for you." Simi looked at her. The particular patience of someone who had dealt with this dynamic before, not from Vanessa specifically, but from the architecture of it, the performance of power from someone who didn't have what they wanted, was not comfortable patience. It was controlled. There was a difference. "He invested in the business," Simi said. "I run it. The distinction matters, and I won't keep explaining it. I'm sure you won't." Vanessa looked around the shop with the assessing expression she'd used on Helen's estate the night she came over for dinner. "Where does the produce come from?" "Our suppliers." "And who funds the supplier relationships?" "I do. with operating revenue. If you'd like to see the books, I'd refer you to my lawyer. A customer near the front door, an older woman in a good coat, who had come in 20 minutes earlier for her weekly shop, made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Vanessa looked at her. The woman looked back with the particular expression of someone who had been watching this kind of performance for 68 years and found it neither surprising nor impressive. She set her basket on the counter for Simi to ring up. She did not look away from Vanessa while she did it. It was Helen. She was in her good coat with her weekly tote bag, looking exactly like what she was, an older woman who bought groceries here regularly. Vanessa went very still. Helen said nothing. She looked at Vanessa with an expression that held no anger in it at all, which was, Simi thought afterward, exactly why it worked. Anger would have given Vanessa something to push back against. What Helen's expression offered was simply recognition, the look of someone who had seen clearly and had no investment in pretending otherwise. The performance drained out of the room. Vanessa's friends lowered their phones. Vanessa said, "I didn't." She stopped. "I didn't know you came here." Helen said, "I come here every week." She picked up her bag from the counter where Simi had already finished ringing her through. Simi is an excellent shopkeeper. She nodded once at Simi, then walked to the door, then through it. Vanessa stood in the middle of the shop for a moment. Her friends were looking at anything except her. Then she left. Simi stood at her counter and breathed in through her nose and out through her mouth, and went back to ringing up the woman who had moved to the front of the line. The customer said quietly, "You handled that well." "Thank you," Simi said. She meant it. She closed up at 7 and sat in the back room and let herself feel everything she'd been holding at controlled distance for the past 8 hours. It was not a small amount. The piece was still circulating. 47,000 interactions had become more by evening. The story Vanessa was telling was spreading faster than the truth had moved. She called Marcus. "She came to the store," she said. A long pause. "Tell me," she told him. He listened to all of it, including the part about Helen. When she finished, he said, "My mother didn't tell me she was going. She doesn't announce things." "No, she doesn't?" He was quiet for a moment. "Are you okay?" Simi thought about what okay meant. She thought about her counter and her customers and the woman who had come in because the piece sounded shady and left with 3 meal kits. She thought about Helen walking through the door with her weekly tote bag. "I'm okay," she said. "I'm also tired, and I want this to stop. I'm calling the legal team in the morning." She didn't argue this time. That night, the post crossed 200,000 interactions. Simi turned her phone face down on the nightstand and lay in the dark, looking at the ceiling. Outside her window, the city went on making its ordinary sounds. She thought about what Vanessa had said. Confident. "Since your billionaire boyfriend renovated a shop for you." She thought about the precision of the diminishment in that word, since, as if her confidence had a source other than herself. As if she had not always been exactly this way, standing exactly this straight, with or without a store on Peachtree Lane. She thought, "I have always been this person." She thought, "The shop didn't make me. The shop gave me somewhere to be what I already was." She turned on her side and closed her eyes. She slept. The video appeared on a Thursday morning, posted by a woman named Caroletta, who ran a candle and incense stall 3 spaces down from Rosa's at the West Side Market. She had been there the morning of the original incident. She had not posted the footage at the time because she hadn't thought about it. It had sat in her phone for weeks. And then the blog piece about the store had run. And then Vanessa's post. And that morning she had gone through her old videos looking for something else and found it. She posted it with a caption that said, "Posted this originally for myself." But given what's been going around online, I think people should see what actually happened at the West Side Market in October. I was there. The video ran for 2 minutes and 14 seconds. The camera was at a slight angle. She'd been filming from behind her stall, probably to catch something else, but the central action was clear. The SUV in the pedestrian lane. The horn. Helen stumbling. The crowd freezing, Simi already moving before any of them. And then Vanessa getting out of the vehicle. 2 minutes and 14 seconds of exactly what had happened, without commentary, without framing, without any of the implication Vanessa had used to build her story. What the video offered instead was sequence. Event and response. Cause and effect. By noon, it had more interactions than Vanessa's post had reached in its first full day. Simi watched it in the back room of the store, alone, with the door closed. She watched it twice. Then she sat for a while with her hands in her lap and felt the particular weight of being witnessed, not performed at, not written about, but actually seen in the moment of doing something that had felt, to her, simply necessary. She hadn't known anyone was filming. Of course she hadn't. That was the point her father would have made. Her phone began to ring at a frequency she hadn't experienced before. She let most of it go to voicemail. She answered her mother. And Demi, and Marcus in that order. Rosa said, "The woman with the candle stall. Caroletta." Simi said, "I'm going to bring her something from the store. Bring her the good peppers." "She knows what good peppers are." Marcus said, "Have you seen the numbers?" "I've seen the video." "Simi, I know." She kept her voice level. "I know. I'm okay." 2 of Vanessa's brand partners have already gone quiet on their accounts. Her last sponsored post dropped 70% engagement overnight. "I'm not celebrating that. I'm not asking you to." She heard him processing something behind the silence. "What?" she said. "She reached out to one of my board members." Implied she had information she might share publicly if the business relationship between you and me was made more official. He said it carefully. The way he said things when he was managing something he knew might provoke a reaction. It was not a direct threat. It was constructed to be deniable. But the direction was clear. Simi was quiet for a moment. What information? None that is accurate. She is suggesting that the partner structure is a vehicle for something other than what the documents say. He paused. "My legal team sent a cease and desist this morning. It's been received." "I want to see it," Simi said. "I'll send it to Iris. Send it to me directly." He did. She read it at the counter between customers, standing with her phone against her palm. The letter was direct and specific. It identified the communication to the board member, characterized it as an attempt to coerce through threatened false disclosure, and advised that any further contact in this direction would result in formal legal action. It was signed by Marcus's general counsel and copied to 3 other parties. It was thorough. It was correct. It also had his name on it, which meant it was his action, not hers. She called him back. "I need you to understand something. Tell me. This is my business and my name being protected. I'm grateful you moved quickly. But I need you to not handle things for me without asking first." A pause. "I should have called you before filing. Yes, I'm sorry. I was angry and I moved fast." "Being angry is not a reason to do it without me," she said. "Being angry is what you feel. Doing is what you decide. Those aren't the same." Another pause. Longer. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Not defensive, just honest. "You're right. That's exactly right. And I'm sorry." She softened slightly. "The letter is good. I'm glad it went. Just ask next time." "I will." They were quiet for a moment. Outside the store, a delivery truck double parked on the block and someone leaned on their horn for 3 seconds and then stopped. The world going about its business. "I want to say something," Marcus said. "Say it." "You're not a crisis that needs managing," he said. "You're the only part of this that's actually real. I keep handling things because handling is what I know how to do, and it keeps coming out wrong with you because you don't need to be handled." She considered that. "What do I need?" "To be asked," he said. "I think that's mostly it." She thought about his answer for a while. She thought about the partnership agreement with her name first. She thought about 6 weeks of him, carrying boxes and bringing coffee at the right temperature and sitting at the corner table without claiming the space. She said, "Ask next time, and we won't fight about it. Is this a fight? This is a conversation where both of us said something true, which is slightly better." She looked at the counter. "Come by the store this evening. I want to talk about what comes next." What comes next is Vanessa losing the 2 brand contracts. That might happen with or without either of us doing anything. What I want to talk about is the store. She paused. "I want to expand the meal kit offering. I have an idea about a subscription model, and I want to walk you through the numbers." He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, with something in his voice that was not quite surprise but close to it, "You're working on expansion while Vanessa is posting smear pieces." The store doesn't stop because she decided to have a bad week, Simi said. People still need to eat. He was quiet for another moment. Then, I'll be there at 6. She hung up. She rang through a customer who had been waiting patiently at the counter with 2 meal kits and a bunch of fresh herbs. The woman said, "You run a nice shop." "Thank you," Simi said. "Come back Saturday. I'm trying a new herb mix for the kits." The afternoon moved. The video kept circulating. By 3 o'clock, the first sponsor's account had quietly unpinned their last Vanessa collaboration post. By 5, a second had posted a brief statement about reviewing their partnership commitments. Simi tracked it without giving it too much space. She had made peace with the fact that she couldn't control what circulated and what didn't. She could control what she did with the hours she had. Marcus came at 6 with teefgout from the Thai place, which was now a pattern she'd noticed and not objected to. They ate at the counter. She walked him through the subscription model, 3 tiers, weekly delivery option, anchored on the existing meal kit range with seasonal additions. He asked the right questions. They argued productively about pricing for 12 minutes and landed on a number they both could defend. When the food was gone and the numbers were back in her folder, he said, "Are you okay?" "I'm tired," she said, "but I'm okay." "What does tired mean tonight?" "It means I spent today being named as a thing I'm not, and also selling 140 meal kits and arguing with you about price points, and all of that happened in the same body." She looked at the table. "I'm okay. I just need to not be in a situation for a few hours. Then I'll go." "You don't have to. You just said you need not to be in a situation." "You're not a situation," she said.
He looked at her.
"You're just a person," she said, which is different and considerably easier. He stayed for another hour. They did not talk about Vanessa. They talked about the subscription model and Rosa's supplier connections and the herb mix for Saturday and whether the store needed a second refrigerator unit in the spring. It was, Simi thought, the most ordinary hour she'd had in 2 weeks. When he left, she locked the front door and stood in the empty store for a moment in the quiet. The display window showed the street, a couple walking a dog, a man on a bicycle, the ordinary evening life of a block that was becoming familiar to her. Vanessa sent a direct message to Simi's personal account at 10:15 that night. It said, "You don't know what you started." Simi read it. She noted the time. She screenshotted it and sent it to Iris. Then she put her phone face down on the nightstand and turned off the light and went to sleep. The second brand partnership termination was posted on a Monday. A short statement, 3 sentences, using the phrase, "conduct inconsistent with our brand values," in the way those statements always did, which was precisely enough to make the reason clear without saying anything that could be litigated. The post got 20,000 shares in 6 hours. None of them were from people who were sorry. Simi read it in the morning before she opened the store, noted it, and went to make coffee. She had been in the store for 3 weeks since the original blog piece had run. In those 3 weeks, Semi-Fresh's foot traffic had increased by 31%. She had added 12 new regular customers. The subscription tier she and Marcus had designed had 43 sign-ups in its first 5 days. The story Vanessa had told had sent people to her, because the story was not what she'd thought it was, and people who came to check would find that out within 5 minutes of walking through the door. Simi understood now that this was the correction that had ever mattered. Not a press statement, not a rebuttal, just the store being what it was. She was at the counter when Vanessa came in, not the way she'd come before, not with friends, not with her phone out, not dressed for the occasion. She came in a coat and low boots and no performance, which made her look younger than she had in either of their previous encounters and considerably less frightening. She closed the door behind her and stood near the front of the store, not moving further in. Simi looked at her. "I'm not here to start anything," Vanessa said. Her voice was different at this register, not the bright, calibrated version, just the actual one. "I just wanted to say something." "Go ahead," Simi said. Vanessa looked at the store, the display, the refrigerator case, the corner table where Helen's teacup was usually sitting. "I told myself a story," she said, "about what you were doing. It was easier than the other story." "What was the other story?" "That he left because I showed him something he couldn't come back from, and that it had nothing to do with you. She didn't look away. It was easier to make you the problem. Simi said nothing. She let the words sit where they'd been put. I think I knew, some part of me, that the post was wrong, Vanessa continued. Not wrong in the legal way. Wrong in the… She stopped, started again. Wrong in the way that matters. Why are you telling me this? Vanessa seemed to think about that honestly. Because my lawyer told me not to. Because doing things my lawyer tells me not to is apparently the only thing I'm good at right now. Something in her face shifted, not quite humor, just the brief acknowledgement of irony. And because the sponsors weren't the worst part. The worst part was reading the comments on that first piece, the ones from people who actually thought what I wrote was kind of brave, and knowing that they were wrong and that I'd made them wrong. Silmi looked at her for a long moment. I'm not forgiving anything today, she said. I don't know if I ever will. But I hear what you're saying. Vanessa nodded. She picked up a bag of the prepped lemongrass mix from the display and looked at it. She set it back down. She said, "It's a good store." She left. Simi stood at her counter for a moment and let the space settle back into what it was. Then the door opened again and an older woman in a good coat came in with her weekly tote bag. "Good morning," Helen said. "Good morning, Mama Helen, your usual table." Helen took her usual chair in the corner and set her tote on the other chair and accepted the cup of tea Demi brought without being asked, because Demi had been paying attention for 3 months and knew what usual meant. Helen opened the newspaper she'd brought and began to read. 15 minutes later, Marcus came in. He came in the way he came in on most mornings now. No announcement, no drama, just through the door with his coat on and a paper bag from the bakery around the corner, because he'd learned, somewhere in the last 2 months, that the store didn't carry pastries, and she always ate breakfast too late. He set the bag on the counter. He looked at the chair where he usually sat. He looked at Simi. Vanessa was here, Simi said. He went still. She came without a camera this time, Simi said. She said what she said. I listened. She paused. That part is done. He read her face. Are you okay with that being done? I don't know yet, but I'm not okay. She picked up the pastry bag. What is this? Almond croissant. The baker says it's new. You tried one. I tried half. She opened the bag. She ate half of the croissant over the next 10 minutes, standing at her counter, while 3 customers came in and she helped them, and Marcus sat at his usual chair near the window and opened his laptop and did work, and Demi restocked the display case, and Helen turned a page of the newspaper and said, without looking up, the 3rd section has something about the West Side Market. Urban development piece. I saw it, Simi said. Left them a comment last week. What did you say? That the vendors who've been there 20 years have a right to be consulted before anyone rezones anything they depend on. Helen turned another page. Your mother should send a letter. My mother is already writing a letter. Good. By 10 o'clock, the store was in its usual Friday morning rhythm, busy, purposeful, the particular hum of a space that knew what it was for. Simi moved through it the way she'd moved through everything she'd given herself to fully. Without waste, without performance, with the particular attention that looked like ease but was really precision that had stopped needing to announce it itself. 2 months after the soft opening, the partnership agreement had been reviewed by Iris, who said the buyout clause Simi had negotiated was cleaner than most she'd seen from investment shops twice this size. The subscription model was running profitably. The supplier relationships were solid. The name on the lease had never been anything but hers. What was growing beside the store was slower and quieter, and harder to put a number to, but it was real in the way that things were real when they'd been built from the materials at hand. Honestly, imperfectly, with the full awareness of what they were. She looked at Marcus at his usual table, his attention on whatever he was working on, his coat still on, because he always forgot to take it off in the first 10 minutes. She looked at Helen in the corner with her newspaper and her tea. She looked at Demi refilling the display and humming something under her breath. She thought, this is what it looks like. Not glamorous. Not the story Vanessa had told or the story the blog had told. Just a store on a regular block in Atlanta. Stocked with good produce and prepped with care, and people in it who had found the right arrangement with each other. At 11, Helen came to the counter to settle her tab, which she always paid in cash and which was always exactly correct because she counted it out at home before she left. She put the bills on the counter and picked up her tote. "I'll see you Tuesday," she said. "See you Tuesday, Mama Helen." Helen looked at her for a moment. That look again, the settled, attentive one that Simi had learned by now to receive without needing to interpret. It meant, "I see you." It meant, exactly as I thought. It meant something that didn't need words as much as it needed time, and they had had enough of that by now for Simi to feel it without translation. Helen picked up her tote and walked to the door. She pulled it open. The December cold came in for a second, and then she was through it, and the door closed behind her. Marcus looked up from his laptop. Simi was already at the counter, already ringing up the next customer, already doing the next thing. She glanced at him once, quick, warm, entirely without performance, and went back to work. He went back to his laptop. Outside, Peachtree Lane moved through its Friday morning in the ordinary way. Deliveries and commuters and people going where they were going, unaware of the small, specific, quietly earned things happening inside the store, with the clean display window and sign in the same font Simi had chosen herself. If you've made it to the end of today's story, you already know what it is. Not every act of kindness comes with a visible audience, but sometimes it comes with consequences that surprise you in the best possible way. Share this story with someone who deserves to hear it, and we'll see you next time.